Episode 87, Hell Gate. Holy Angel Lena. A bright, gentle, and benevolent woman, a kind woman who suited the word angel more than anyone else. She opened the Hell Gate. Because of that, countless monsters entered Endymion. But rather than that fact, Cordelia was troubled by something else. Her eyes widely opened, and she approached Lena. Lena. Lena's face wasn't the one that Cordelia knew. It was also different from her dying face in the cinematic movie. Her hair was still blonde, but her white skin was now a pale purple. She now had red and black eyes instead of her clear blue eyes. The white sclera in her eyes were now completely black, and her red eyes had slit pupils like that of a serpent's eyes. What had happened? Lena was originally a holy angel. She was an angel of this world, someone who gained the power of an angel through ancestral regression. Don't come too close, you can't come close. Lena hurriedly retreated to avoid Cordelia's hand. The teary-faced Cordelia turned to Jude. Cordelia didn't know why Lena became like this now, but she at least knew what Lena's condition was. Demon syndrome. A disease that ate away a creature's body when exposed to the aura of hell. Most humans immediately died the moment they were exposed to the aura of hell, but some people who were mentally and physically strong ended up having demon syndrome. The effect of demon syndrome was simple. The afflicted creature becomes a demon. They usually became lower-ranking demons with almost no intellectual capacities, but those who had well-trained bodies and truly noble and strong minds became demons with intellectual capacities. And now Lena had demon syndrome. Through that, Jude was able to come up with a more complete answer. You escaped from hell, and in the process, the Hell Gate opened. Lena slowly nodded. I was dragged to hell when I was fighting demons in the Argon Empire. I struggled and fought many times there, and was able to barely escape at the end, but in the aftermath, the Hell Gate opened. Lena had a very distressed look. She thought of the tragedy of Paragon and of all her loved ones whom she lost, including her master, who she considered as her father. However, she had opened the Hell Gate with her own hands, which might once again lead to something similar to the tragedy of Paragon. She couldn't bear it. She had to solve this problem even at the expense of her own life. She couldn't properly use the angel's power because of the demon syndrome, but just before she died, she recovered from the demon syndrome because she completely used up her angel powers. It made sense. Lena sacrificed herself to close the Hell Gate and then died a lonely death. I have to close the Hell Gate. I'll do anything to close it. Lena said in an earnest tone. Her expression and voice seemed like she was confessing her fault. It's not Lena's fault, Cordelia said. But Lena shook her head. No, it's my fault. No, definitely no, you didn't open the gate on purpose. You're a good person and you're still trying to somehow close the Hell Gate. That's right, so don't look so distressed. Jude and I will help you. We'll close the gate together and go back happy and laughing. Cordelia poured out her thoughts as she held Lena's hand and then smiled. Her words might not have presented a solution to their problem, but Lena smiled after hearing Cordelia. It started awkwardly, but for the first time since the Hell Gate opened, Lena had a proper smile. And that made Cordelia smile even more. With a broad smile, she said as she hugged Lena. We can do it, my Jude is excellent. Jude will somehow find a solution, isn't that right? This time again, her words offered no solutions. But at her words full of strong faith in him, Jude nodded his head. We can do it, so let's check the situation first. Lena, do you have a way to replenish your powers? Jude began to lead the conversation. Lena looked back at Cordelia and Jude instead of replying immediately, and soon she smiled again. It's like I'm with Landius. A person who was absurdly optimistic and reliable that could make one feel at ease anytime and anywhere. I'm thinking of using Endymion's Grand Magic Circle. Lena moved her hand in the air and used magic. After a full map of Endymion appeared in the air, a complex figure made of white light was drawn over the map. The ancient high elves bet on everything for their final decisive battle against the demon prince in Endymion, and as a result, the entire capital became a weapon itself. After absorbing the mana of all the citizens living in the capital at once, the magic circle was activated to inject the concentrated and amplified power into one person who would fight against the demon prince. I discovered that there's still a lot of mana stored in Endymion. If we activate the magic circle, we can somehow gather the mana necessary to use the heavenly seal. It was a plausible solution. But Jude thought of a problem in her solution, while Cordelia instinctively realized it. The method Lena used in the original. That one and only method led to Lena's death in the end. But she didn't die because of that method alone. Something must have changed and brought her harm. Wait, if you use this magic circle, shouldn't an angel be the target of the gathered mana? At that moment, Kaplan, whose presence was almost forgotten together with Bellagio, spoke as he looked at the full map in the air. As a professor in archaeology at the Institutional Academy, he was familiar with ancient languages. Lena hesitated for a moment, as if she had been stabbed in her sore spot, before she slowly said again. Yes, in order to use that magic, one must have the genes of an angel. Though I am afflicted with demon syndrome, I haven't lost my angel's genes. That is why I'm sure that I can do it. Lena said that with a smile, but Jude and Cordelia were not fooled. It was the reason why Lena lost her life. Lena was not a real angel right now because of her demon syndrome. So Lena was greatly hit and suffered from the concentrated sacred power. So they had to change her plan. And the two had another solution. I'll do it, Cordelia said to Jude with her eyes. Although she had not yet used ancestral regression, Cordelia had the genes of an angel. She fought against the demons with the witch's power, but she wouldn't be dealt a huge blow by the sacred power if she was not transformed into a witch. Are you sure? Definitely. Cordelia's eyes seemed to be on fire. Therefore, Jude conceded. It was impossible to stop the current Cordelia. Jude wanted to avoid Cordelia's plan, but she was correct. The best solution was for Cordelia to replace Lena. Let's do it. Leave it to me. After she charmingly smiled, Cordelia straight away began to explain about herself to Lena, while Jude turned to Kaplan. Will you help us, Sir Kaplan? May. Yes, we need Sir Kaplan's help in activating the magic circle. Someone has to manipulate the console in order to operate the magic circle. This was Jude's first time in Endymion, but not the first in Magellan, the magic kingdom of the High Elves. He had already encountered a similar kind of magic circle somewhere in the ruins of Magellan. The reason why it took so long for Lena was because she did everything herself. But not now. If Kaplan was here, it would be possible to easily operate the console, which used the ancient language of the High Elves. I'm glad that Sir Kaplan is here. Kaplan flinched at Jude's words, but he soon nodded and widely smiled. Leave it to me, I've seen something similar in my research. Yes, I believe in you. After tapping Kaplan on his shoulder, Jude advanced towards Cordelia and Lena. Lena was a little surprised at Cordelia's explanation, but instead of being doubtful, she looked apologetic. The burden will be great. It's okay, even if I look like this, I'm very strong. Cordelia grinned and thumped her chest before she turned to Jude. Jude, when we activate the magic circle, the demons will notice, so we need to turn their gaze somewhere. Why is your face like that? No, it's just amazing that you came up with this. I'm sorry, please don't hit me. When Jude made a playful remark, Cordelia clenched her fist and made a HMPH sound, but she soon loosened her face. In the first place, she knew that he was trying to lighten the mood because of Lena. Lena, please draw the magic circle for the heavenly seal. It was absolutely impossible for them to currently learn high-ranking magic, such as the heavenly seal, with little preparation. Lena smiled again at Cordelia's request. Yes, I'll prepare it right away. In just a few minutes, the group's mood completely changed. Close the Hell Gate and solve Endymion's problem. Save Lena's life. We can do it, Jude said in a small voice and then took a step forward. They began their operation. In order to activate Endymion's magic circle, all 9 magic stones at the outskirts of the underground city had to be activated. But it wasn't that difficult. 6 of them were already activated by Lena. While Kaplan controlled the console and Lena drew the magic circle of the heavenly seal, Jude traveled around the outskirts of the city and activated the remaining magic stones. Jude used the 24 Gale steps to jump to higher places in order to hide from the low-ranking demons who did not have a proper command system. He hid so well that even his shadow was not noticed by the monsters. He finally activated the last magic stone. Now it was time to return to the central tower and join Lena in order to begin their faint operation of drawing the demons' attention. Jude! Lena! Upon reaching the first floor of the tower, Lena quickly came to him. She had just finished drawing the magic circle. Everything went smoothly. If their plan proceeded as it is, they would be able to close the Hell Gate successfully. But as always, not everything went according to plan. Time had passed while he traveled around activating the magic stones. The Hell Gate finally went beyond the first stage and began its transition into the second stage. Something like a ghost's wail shook the entire underground city. The aura of hell became much stronger, and an overpowering dark and cold energy spread everywhere. The Hell Gate also became bigger. The crack grew wider, and it now really looked like a gate. And more demons began to cross over. A named demon also appeared. Their distance was quite far. The distance between the Hell Gate and the tower was hundreds of meters. But it was still huge enough to be clearly seen. On a huge chariot pulled by hell dogs stood a lacto that emitted a powerful energy. It wasn't a common lacto, but a powerful named demon. As soon as it appeared, the air in the underground city shook once again. Its appearance alone made the hairs stood on end. Bandazel. Jude and Lena spoke almost simultaneously. For Jude, it was a boss who appeared in the middle of Legend of Heroes 2, and for Lena, it was a persistent pursuer who chased after her several times in hell. We need to draw the attention of this guy. Bandazel wasn't normally a strong opponent. But if they thoughtlessly activated the magic circle, the tower could be smashed before the magic circle concentrated its power on Cordelia. So they had to fight him and buy some time. Jude and Lena's job was to keep him away from the tower. We need to hold our ground for 3 minutes. Lena smiled at Jude's words. Yes, 3 minutes. It's going to be a really long 3 minutes. I know. Lena was not in normal condition now. But she was one of the 5 heroes. Even though she had the demon syndrome, she was still one of the heroes who ended the tragedy of the Paragon Kingdom. It's a strange feeling. He was fighting together with the hero in the first episode of Legend of Heroes. They were in an equal position, and not him being protected or helped. I must be a little crazy too. His heart was pounding amidst their situation. Let's go, Jude. Yes, Lena. Jude and Lena moved towards the Hell Gate. And Bandazel sensed them. Standing in front of the Hell Gate, he looked at the far distance and sneered. Lena. Bandazel was a named demon. At the moment he appeared, the group of monsters who were moving around without any order suddenly transformed into an army. Everyone looked in the same direction at once. There was still some distance from them. Dozens of buildings were lined up in between them. But that didn't mean much. It's 3 minutes. 3 minutes. It would work out somehow. Jude grinned and activated the power of Ninth Heaven's 9 doors. Lena also focused her mana on both of her hands. Cordelia. Jude unconsciously spoke, and his words became a signal. Jude and Lena kicked the ground. At the same time, Bandazel loudly shouted, and the charging of the monsters from hell reverberated on the ground. Another sound was added. The ground roared, and a strong and beautiful light instantly drove out the darkness of the underground city. Pillars of light rose up from the 9 magic stones at once. The ground lit up, and the mighty and ancient magic circle began to operate. The demons hesitated for a moment. But not Bandazel. He didn't have a clear grasp of what was happening now, but he knew well of the fact that he had to move right away. Break it, destroy it, sweep it all away. At Bandazel's yell, the demons began to move again. Bandazel spread out his large wings and spurred the chariot. Jude and Lena split up to play their respective roles. Lena was the only one who could stop the numerous monsters that were flocking towards the tower. Thus, Jude's role was naturally fixed. 3 minutes. Round 1 against Bandazel. Cordelia. Jude recited Cordelia's name once again, as if in prayer before he began moving. He flew towards Bandazel, who was charging straight towards the tower. Black Dragon Cross Strike. He showed off his strongest skill from the very beginning. Bandazel stopped his charge as the mighty Black Cross broke through the air. He swung his iron whip on the Black Cross that was rushing towards him. Bang! The Black Cross was instantly destroyed. In addition, the air was torn apart, and above the ground, flames rose along the trajectory of the whip. A named demon. An unsealed and powerful monster that just came out of hell. The demon smiled. He sighted Jude beyond the place where he destroyed the Black Cross. "Hi," Jude said, and the monster went mad. He generated black waves that were like flames, and then charged towards Jude. Crack! The iron whip cracked through the air again, and everything in its trajectory was destroyed. Rujumble boom! It wasn't thunder, it was the sound of the buildings collapsing at once. Jude kicked the ground. He ran through the rubble of the collapsing building. Let's focus on evasion. He had to act like outboxer. He had no chances of winning in a head-to-head confrontation. He had to fool the enemy with his mobility. Faster. A little faster. Boom! A huge hammer smashed the place where Jude had just stood. Bandazel had a warhammer on his right hand. He was about 7 meters tall. He was like a giant to Jude, but he was not slow. Bang! There was a loud noise again. It was Jude this time. Rather than widening his distance from Bandazel, he narrowed it down as he created a whirlwind and became a gale. Running around wasn't the only way to get its attention. Hell's blood slash. The red sword slashed Bandazel's waist. It was a shallow slash. But the slash was enough to cause bleeding. "You little rat!" The enraged Bandazel furiously shouted and turned around as he flung his whip towards Jude. A sharp and fast attack. His attack was inescapable. Therefore, Jude did not avoid it. He did not deviate from the trajectory of the iron whip. Crack! The ground was destroyed. But Jude wasn't. He ignored the attack through the use of the fairy steps. After the attack passed through him, he began sprinting. Bastard! Bandazel spread out his wings. It was a fast action. So Jude had to be faster. 24 gale steps, black winds advent. A pitch-black wind blew. The black wind moved between the buildings, breaking and splitting some of the buildings. Yuzuo! Bandazel raised his speed. His iron wind tore apart the space itself, and his angry roar shook the black wind as well as the air. Ack! The running Jude got thrown on the ground. He couldn't completely avoid the wave-like attack, so he rolled on the floor and Bandazel appeared in front of Jude, swinging down his hammer at that moment. Boom! He rolled and avoided it. But once was his limit. When Bandazel flung his iron whip again, he had no way of escaping this time. The iron whip cracked through the air. It rushed to turn Jude into a pool of blood. He had already used the fairy steps. So he had to use something else. He had to avoid the attack somehow. What should I do? There was no time. The Black Dragon Cross strike took too much time. It was impossible to avoid the iron whip that struck the surroundings by a few steps. What should I do then? How do I do it? In that moment, in that crack of time, Jude calculated. No, he didn't calculate it. At that moment, he felt it instinctively like Cordelia. It was new and strange to him. It was such a short time, but he was able to think in that moment. It was even possible to recite the mnemonic chant. So Jude acted. He added the mnemonic chant of the 9th heaven's 9 doors to the 36 world steps, not the 24 gale steps. Just as the Holy Cross Punch advanced to the Black Dragon Cross Strike, it gave new power to the 36 world steps. And the result? Barring. It was like thunder. The fearsome iron whip struck and swept the surrounding area, destroying everything. But Bandazel couldn't smile. His face was distorted. Because not everything was destroyed. There was a man who stood alive amidst the storm of fearsome destruction. Jude was standing. He didn't move far away. He stood on the spot where he originally stood. The 36 world steps was a footwork skill that defended the user by evading attacks that came from all directions. Moreover, the power of the 9th heaven's 9 doors was added. Thus, Jude was able to escape. No matter how violent the Iron Whip's attack was, in the end, it was an attack that created a single line. If he could pinpoint the direction in which that line landed, he could completely avoid that single line. With the 36 world steps, it became possible to fly in any direction continuously and deviate from the trajectory of the whip's attack. Thus, he finally avoided the attack itself. Jude roughly breathed. Subsequently, blood flowed down from his lips, and his legs shook before he collapsed onto the ground. It's still too much. He couldn't handle it properly. Avoiding the attack was a miracle in itself. Bandazel was bewildered. But he soon regained his reason. It was true that Jude made a miraculous move, but he was now seated on the ground. Die. A cliché line. The sitting Jude panted as he saw the enemy's hammer, but he remained on the ground. He recited the name of a person. Cordelia. It was time. 3 minutes had passed. The tower began to shine. Bandazel realized it too. He didn't know that an immense amount of power was concentrated on the tower. But he didn't care. He was in a hurry to kill Jude, who was right in front of him. He didn't make the mistake of looking at the tower. He just consistently held the hammer. He wanted to strike and crush the enemy in front of him. That was the right thing to do. This was his iron rule that had saved his life many times. But that was why Bandazel didn't see it. The approach of a woman who valued Jude's life more than the closing of the Hell Gate. Instead of activating the magic circle as soon as she gained Endymion's power, the woman rushed to the ground with clenched fists. Jude! Boom! There was a roar. Bandazel was forced to look back, but it was already late at that time. An intangible force that was so powerful struck Bandazel and blew him away. Crash! The giant Bandazel rolled on the ground and crashed into a building. And Cordelia didn't care. Her whole body was covered with a pure and white light, and she landed next to Jude. Hey, are you okay? Hey. I'm okay. He was grateful for her concern, but it was rather difficult to breathe because she pulled on his collar. The seal, quickly, Jude said as he held Cordelia's hand. He was thankful that she ran to save him, but she had to hurry to close the Hell Gate. Endymion's power could be maintained for a few seconds at most. She also had to go back to the tower and activate the magic circle of the heavenly seal that Lena installed on the top floor of the tower. However, it was before Jude could finish what he wanted to say. Bandazel stood up again. At the same time he got up, he sent off a powerful air wave, and Cordelia hurriedly waved her hand to stop him. Boom! There was a terrible loud sound, and Cordelia swallowed her scream, because Endymion's power was too strong. If she continued maintaining that power, Cordelia herself would be destroyed. Jude figured it out too. So he tried to speak again, but Cordelia was faster. She suddenly made a charming smile and said as she looked straight at Jude. Hey, yes. Do you trust me? What is she talking about all of a sudden? At the moment when Jude made a confused expression, the blown-away Bandazel broke the rubble of the building and stood up again. There was no time now. Jude stared at Cordelia. Cordelia was looking at Jude herself with a smile that showed her front teeth. As he stared at those blue eyes, Jude nodded. I trust you. Then I'll do it. Luke will take care of Kaplan, so don't worry about him. Huh. That was it. Cordelia didn't talk about it anymore. She was going to do it. Jude trusted her, so she would do it. Cordelia stood straight and looked at Bandazel. She spoke to him and Jude at the same time. I figured it out while I was looking at the map on the tower. There was a dragon vein flowing under here too, you know. A flowing dragon vein. What do you mean all of a sudden? Why all of a sudden? He understood. He realized it. So Jude jumped up and shouted. Hey, hey. No, hey, no way, hey. But it was too late. He already said that he trusted her. The second way to close the Hell Gate. And that was to destroy the place where the Hell Gate had opened. As a bonus, the demons are also defeated. Bandazel still couldn't comprehend it. Instead of stopping Cordelia, Jude gave up and closed his eyes. And Cordelia ferociously smiled as her teeth shined. She gathered all of Endymion's power and created a spear of calamity before stabbing it into the ground. The power of Endymion hit the dragon vein. And what occurred because of it? The stuff that was done by Cordelia. F***ck bang. The moment Cordelia gracefully spoke, the dragon vein ran away along with a tremendous roar. The last day of the underground city of Endymion had begun. What color is your blood? A famous quote of the character Rei from the Japanese series, Fist of the North Star, frequently used when criticizing villains for their evil deeds. The Day of Destruction. It was the last day of Endymion, the capital of the magic kingdom of Magellan, which did not collapse even in a direct confrontation with the mighty demon Prince of Hell. At first, it was a vibration. Soon there was a tremendous roar, and the surrounding area, no, the whole underground shook. Kralak. It was not an ordinary earthquake. Dozens to hundreds of cracks appeared on the ground. The huge cracks spread, destroying the beautiful and elegant buildings built by the High Elves a long time ago. Boom crash. Hundreds of buildings collapsed like dominoes. It did not stop after that, as the reverberation on the ground grew stronger and countless debris began falling down from the ceiling. Dragon vein. A great stream of power that flowed in the underground of the wild lands. A strong and unusual power that was the wild god's source of power. A portion of it began to run out of control. The dragon vein that the High Elves used as the city's energy source in the past now exploded after having been stimulated by the Spear of Calamity. Barring. Flames shot up through the torn ground. And then there was a blinding light. The terrifying power soared to the ceiling and destroyed everything it came across. It only took a few seconds for all of these to happen. Awa. Wara. Gawak. The monsters from hell were screaming. Even Bandazel struggled in the midst of the fearsome natural disaster, so he couldn't look back at Jude and Cordelia. But not for Jude. He opened his eyes and shouted, grasping Cordelia's shoulders. Hey, you're crazy. They were in an emergency and an extremely dangerous situation, but he couldn't help but say those words to her. And Cordelia struck back at such Jude. You said that you trusted me. F***ck, why did I trust you? You cursed, that's too much. You always do it. That was it. They ran out of time to argue. The ground shook and then collapsed as it began to sink, and the ceiling also fell down. The rubble that crashed into the ground scattered in all directions. Boom booms boom. F***ck. Jude cursed again. It was a serious expression and not an exclamation, but Cordelia didn't care. Cordelia suddenly hugged him and shouted, I trust in you too. And she activated the shield. After using up most of her power to create the Spear of Calamity, she used her remaining power to activate Count Chase's ring. A translucent blue shield appeared and covered the two. Fuck. Jude swore again and then carried Cordelia. He carried her with the so-called princess carry and then looked up at the ceiling. "I trust you." Cordelia's voice sounded small when compared to the roaring sounds around them, but instead of responding to her, Jude immediately jumped up. It was something that was seriously crazy to do, but if he didn't, they would die. He darted on the collapsing ground. He grasped the location of the falling debris and computed his route in an instant. Jude held his breath. He created a whirlwind and used it to fly up like a gale. Booms, boom. Boom. The deafening roars continued. In the midst of that, Jude continued to yell. He climbed up and up, kicking on the falling debris. Bang! The wreckage hit their shield. They were not injured because of the shield, but it caused Jude to fall down. But it was only for a moment. Jude spun around in the air and created a strong wind, and their fall stopped at that moment. Cordelia hugged Jude's neck and supported him with fly magic. "Let's go!" Cordelia cried, and Jude turned himself around again. He used the whirlwind to break through the debris. Barring. The whirlwind blew away the debris. The shield pushed away the small rubble. Just a little further. He avoided the wreckage. He avoided the collapsing ceiling. Boom! But it was too much. The falling debris from the ceiling this time was too big. As if it covered the sky. However, Jude didn't give up. He strengthened his arms that held Cordelia and then shouted. "Cordelia." "Okay." Jude removed the shield. Cordelia threw a spear of calamity into the sky, which she had made by scraping up her remaining energy. Spiral. The spear of calamity rotated and pierced the ceiling like a drill. It didn't completely destroy the debris, but it succeeded in making a hole. Jude rushed through that hole. After he passed through the hole that was 2 meters in diameter, he made another leap by using the large ceiling rubble as a foothold. Yuzo. It's the sky. It was as Cordelia said. The chilly blue sky welcomed Jude and Cordelia. The sunlight that poured down was so beautiful. They finally saw the sky. The soaring Jude looked down at the ground and unknowingly apologized to countless people. A huge crater emerged, measuring hundreds of meters in diameter. Hundreds and thousands of pieces of broken wreckage were messily piled upon the shattered ground. Crazy. Later. The last one was Cordelia. She had an awkward look as if she was ashamed, but she still stuck out her tongue. And Jude landed on the ground. Jude stared at Cordelia with a face full of mixed feelings, and Cordelia squeezed her lips once and tried to make an excuse. But not yet. Ryumble. It was quite silent at first. Ryumble. But the sound grew louder. It was not the sound of the already destroyed underground city. The cracks continued to spread out. The cracks stretched out as if it wanted to destroy not only the central underground city, but also the entire Endymion, and it eventually began to spread through the Raptor Canyon. At the moment, the dazed Cordelia said that. Barang. The second major collapse began. An avalanche occurred when parts of the Raptor Canyon collapsed, followed by a series of explosions and collapses across an area spanning hundreds of meters in diameter and several kilometers in length. Boom, booms, boom. Bangs, bangs, bang. Unexpectedly, the time of the crashing itself was short. Because everything shattered and crashed all at once. Rumble. It was the last sound they heard from afar. Silence followed afterwards. The canyon surrounding Endymion collapsed halfway down, and the direction of the wind changed, so the blowing wind struck Jude and Cordelia. A few seconds passed. Jude put Cordelia down on the ground, and as she stood, Cordelia hesitated for a moment before she awkwardly smiled and made a V-sign with her fingers. Problem solved. Because in spite of what preceded, the Hell Gate was closed. Because they achieved their goal. Jude quietly stared at such Cordelia and moved. He raised both of his hands and pinched Cordelia's cheeks. Problem solved, what problem was solved? As he pulled her soft cheeks to the side, Cordelia became teary-eyed and immediately launched a counterattack. "I solved the problem." As she said with a strange pronunciation, Cordelia pinched Jude's cheeks too. "Hey, what are you doing?" "Oh, it hurts, stop." When Jude increased his pulling strength, Cordelia shouted almost as if she was crying, but she didn't back down. Cordelia pinched him harder when he didn't let go of her cheeks. "Let go. You let it go first." It was the moment when they continued to pinch each other in the cheeks. "Papa, papa, papa." White rings of light appeared in succession around Jude and Cordelia. It came so quickly that it was hard to count, but it seemed to be close to 10. Level up, thanks to me. Because they had wiped out the monsters from hell who broke into Endymion. The experience was reduced because it was an indirect defeat and not a direct one, but the number of the monsters was so high that they leveled up a lot. Let go. At Cordelia's insistence, Jude let go first as he grunted. Then Cordelia took her hand off Jude's cheek, not to keep their agreement, but to cover her own cheeks. It really hurts, it's too much, you're mean." The sight of a beautiful girl crying as she covered her burning red cheeks was enough to make Jude a bad guy in the world's eyes, but only Jude and Cordelia were here. Jude said as his eyes narrowed, "Think about what you did based on your conscience. Sob, you said that you trusted me." At the time when Cordelia pretended to cry again. Boom! With a loud noise, Lena broke through the debris and appeared. Moreover, she was not alone. The pale-faced Kaplan and the Bellagio Luke also pushed their heads out of the ground. "Jude, Cordelia." "Lena, I'm glad you're okay." Cordelia ran straight to Lena and exclaimed, and Jude moved towards them after sighing. Lena was strong, but he had been worried about Kaplan and Luke. And after a few steps, what Jude had expected happened. Endymion, the capital of the magic kingdom of Magellan. Kaplan was an archaeologist, and he knew the value of Endymion better than anyone else here. As he grabbed the back of his neck and staggered, Kaplan fell down because of his internal distress, and Jude understood why it made him like that. The ancient ruins had been intact for over 1,000 years. The city of the High Elves that survived the battle against the mighty demon prince was now destroyed to the point where it was hard to find any traces of it. It was a complete tragedy. "Ha, woof, woof." Luke barked as it licked the distressed Kaplan's cheek. Unlike Cordelia, Jude couldn't understand the animal's words, but it seemed like Luke was saying to Kaplan that it was okay. And in the midst of this, Cordelia embraced Lena and asked with a big smile. "Lena, the Hell Gate is gone, right?" Yes, it must have disappeared. Probably no, absolutely. It was not an exaggeration to say that Endymion itself was gone. With her mouth wide open, Lena stared blankly at the surrounding area after the great destruction, but Cordelia was pleased with her answer. She turned to Jude and brightly smiled, flashing a Visen again. "I solved the problem after all, watch." The strange sound at the end of her words was because Jude pinched her cheeks again. "It hurts. I'm pinching you so that you'll feel the pain." Though his thoughts were slightly different this time. "It's soft and smooth." Her rebellious side when she was being pinched was also cute. With a bit of an ulterior motive, Jude continued to punish Cordelia. "Ira." A fearsome roar came from afar. No, it was clearly an angry voice. Boom! The huge demon flew out of the wreckage. Bandazel, the leader of the Lactose, soared from the rubble and spread out its huge bat wings. After all, it was a named demon. He managed to stay alive while the other monsters from hell were being wiped out. Bandazel. Tension spread over Lena's face. But not for Jude and Cordelia. Cordelia turned while her cheeks were still being pinched, and Jude gently removed his hands on her cheeks before turning around. Bandazel. The demon released its power in its rage. He's covered in blood. He's hurt a lot. His head is bleeding. If you look closely, his horns are a bit broken. Bandazel was not able to easily avoid the debris because of his large size. He had felt like he was buried alive under the rubble. So Jude, isn't this situation familiar? It's happened before. Isn't it? It's the same as then, right? The stage boss who was half dead because the stage itself was destroyed. A smile spread over Jude and Cordelia's faces. And from afar, Bandazel finally caught sight of Jude and Cordelia, and then burst into an angry roar again. "Ah, what color is your blood?" He couldn't believe that they destroyed the city itself. If the ancient high elves knew about this, they would cry tears of blood. But Jude and Cordelia didn't think that way. Cordelia said as her eyes sparkled, "They're the same. It looks like they're teaching cliché lines in hell." "Yeah, it's getting frequent." Jude and Cordelia began talking nonsense as usual before they looked at each other and took out potion bottles. And they gulped it down. Bandazel was enraged again. Lena alternately looked at Jude, Cordelia and Bandazel with a mixture of tension and confusion. After they had emptied the potion bottles at once, Jude and Cordelia turned at the same time. They simultaneously threw the potion bottles and then stepped forward as they talked. "Shall we start the boss fight? This time it's not phase 3, it's around phase 2. Bandazel's condition was better than the mid-ranking demonic human whom they had faced before. Even if his condition had worsened, he was still a named demon. But Cordelia wasn't worried. She said as her teeth shone, "It's all right because we have Lena. Shall we ask for help? It's time to repay us." The dazed Lena blinked her eyes because she didn't understand what they were talking about. Jude and Cordelia stared back at each other. They exchanged glances, and at the same time the two spurred on the ground. Bandazel was strong. Although he didn't have a title, he was still a named demon. Very powerful physical abilities. Weak magic abilities. But his magic is strong. His true name is unknown. While they were talking at a distance, Bandazel clenched his fists and cursed. "I'll drag you two to hell. I'll make you realize how merciful death is." There was power in the demon's words. Bandazel's declaration was like an oath, so if they really lost to him, Jude and Cordelia would be dragged to hell and suffer all kinds of hardships. But instead of being afraid, Jude and Cordelia clicked their tongues. As expected of Bandazel, his vocabulary is lacking. A musclehead. Fortunately, the voices of the two did not reach Bandazel. Bandazel cursed again, while Jude looked back at Cordelia and said, "Cordelia, you're over level 50, right?" Yeah, I must have gone beyond that, I think." Her level was originally in the 40s, but because she leveled up around 10 times, her level was now around the 50s. "Let's do this then." As Jude quickly explained the operation, Cordelia's eyes widely opened, and she brightly smiled as she listened to him. "Wow, it's really evil. Do you like it then?" "Yes, I love it." Jude had a faint smile when he saw Cordelia's smiling face, before he turned his gaze back to Bandazel and said, "I ask of you." "Yes, be careful too." Because they needed someone to buy them time. Jude took a deep breath before he activated the ninth heaven's 9 doors and used the Black Wind's advent. Using the Black Wind, he became like a gale and rushed towards Bandazel. Swoosh! The wind wildly blew. The cold wind surrounded his whole body as the pitch-black wind danced together with the golden whirlwind. Cordelia didn't watch him for long. She turned around and ran towards Lena. "Lena! Cordelia, we have to help Jude." Having taken Kaplan and Luke to a safe place, Lena ran and shouted at Cordelia. Cordelia immediately nodded. "We need your help, so Lena, please listen to our plan." Boom! At that very moment, a roar burst out. It was the sound of Bandazel smashing the ground with his giant warhammer. Cordelia flinched for a moment, but she didn't look back. He was Jude. His Chimujic made him extremely good in moving his body. So he was going to be fine. No, he would be fine. The important thing now was to properly spend every second of time that Jude bought for them. Lena. Cordelia grabbed Lena's wrist. Lena was about to run straight towards Jude, but she stopped and looked at Cordelia and then nodded. Lena is not in her normal state now. It was Jude's words. She can't use her angel powers. In the first episode of Legend of Heroes, Lena could already use the powers of an angel. In short, most of Lena's fighting power came from her angel powers. But even so, she was Lena. She was a powerful grand wizard before she became an angel. So she can do it. Lena had used different kinds of magic, of heroes. Jude and Cordelia remembered all the kinds of magic she had used, so Jude informed Cordelia of the magic they needed for this battle, and in turn, she told Lena about that. Can you do it? Boom booms boom. Cordelia asked amidst the loud noises behind her. Lena nodded right away. I can do it. Then let's get started. Boom. She could hear the ground collapsing from afar. Cordelia turned around and was relieved. The black wind was still moving beautifully with the golden whirlwind. Hi. Cordelia unconsciously sighed in relief before she immediately got serious. At the same time that she used the witch transformation, she opened the witch's spell book with a chant. Open the book. The witch's spell book could be opened by a simple command. It was usually small and hung from Cordelia's waist, but at her invocation, the book floated in the air and opened as it became several times larger than her upper body. Find spell. At the touch of Cordelia's hand, the pages of the spell book began to flip quickly. What she wanted to read was the last page that she could open now. New spells were opened when her level exceeded 50. Cordelia quickly recited the spell. Through the witch's spell book, she crammed the new magic into her head. And at that moment, Lena ran to the place where Cordelia had pointed earlier and invoked a spell. Create Golem. It was a spell that created a golem. Not many people knew about it since she gained the powers of a holy angel through ancestral regression, but Lena's specialty was originally the production of magical objects, which included the creation of golems. Rise, rise and fight, my child. Lena had already used up a lot of mana when she fought alone the monsters from hell who flocked to the tower. But she did not hesitate. She poured her remaining mana to help in realizing Cordelia's plan. The ground shot up. It had looked like that. The ground that had collapsed in the great collapse caused by Cordelia had now taken shape and stood up. It was a huge stone golem created from the countless debris. Zulu. It was huge and colossal. Perhaps it was around 30 to 40 meters. No, it was a giant that was almost 50 meters. Moreover, it wasn't just tall. Its whole body was made of rock, and it resembled a knight wrapped in massive and heavy armor. Thud! The ground shook as it took a step. Bandazel reflexively turned after lifting his warhammer that he used when he tried to smash Jude, while Jude smiled in admiration. Tudura! The golem roared and charged towards Bandazel. Its rush was slow perhaps because of its big build. An enormous pressure restrained Bandazel. Ridiculous! Bandazel yelled as he crushed his fear, and then tightly gripped his warhammer and rushed towards the golem. He moved in order to smash the head of that slow-moving golem. It was literally a monster showdown. But Jude didn't just watch it. He turned his gaze to confirm Cordelia's location, and Cordelia also turned to Jude as if their minds were connected. Are you ready? I'm ready. Shortly after exchanging glances, Jude saw Bandazel again. It was a named demon after all. The sight of him jumping high and wielding the warhammer to hit the golem's head was like a scene from myths and legends. Bang! A loud noise erupted when the golem's head was smashed in half from Bandazel's blow, and the golem stepped back. Bandazel continued pursuing the golem as he successively struck it. A big golem couldn't even be an opponent. Every time Bandazel swung his warhammer, a part of the golem broke down. At first, the golem tried to counterattack, but it later became beaten down as it continued to step back. Bangs, bangs, bang. The loud blows continued in succession. The golem lost its head and both of its arms and shoulders, but it continued to step backwards and finally returned to the place where it was created. It's over now. when Bandazel spoke in a cool manner and drew his warhammer. Lena had been manipulating the abnormally huge golem with all her strength, and she suddenly stretched out her hand to Bandazel. Paralyze. It was the paralyze spell that was one of Cordelia's specialties. Their distance was quite far. In addition, there was no direct contact. Therefore, the duration of the spell was only a few seconds. But that was enough. When Lena stretched out her hand, Jude climbed on the golem. He became a black gale, soaring into the sky before he fired it towards Bandazel with all his strength. Black Dragon Cross Strike. The huge black cross from his fist struck Bandazel. But it was not enough. Defeating Bandazel with just that blow was impossible. Jude knew that too, so the purpose of his attack was not to defeat Bandazel. The purpose was to push him away. Shwag. The black cross pushed Bandazel forward. The paralyzed Bandazel was helplessly pushed and thrown into the place where the golem had risen. Bang! A loud roar broke out after he was blown nearly tens of meters and slammed onto the ground. But Bandazel's body was unusually hard. Finishing him off with that kind of fall was impossible. In fact, his paralyzed state immediately wore off after he fell, so he tried to raise himself up. Jude saw it, and he saw the others too. Cordelia. She was standing. She added the spell's echo to the double casting she acquired at level 50. One spell invoked 4 magic spells at the same time. I've been waiting. When Cordelia's canines shone as she brightly smiled, the monsters from hell ran towards Bandazel. To be exact, they were the monsters of hell that Cordelia raised through necromancy. Guire. Quillo. Kawak. Dozens of monsters ran and shrieked as they crushed Bandazel's body. Cordelia's necromancy was clumsy since charging was all that they could do, but in the first place, they had died from being crushed, so only a few of them had intact limbs. But combat power was not important anyway. You scoundrels, no, you evil bastards. Bandazel yelled as he tried to stand up. The monsters from hell were just zombies in the end. It was possible to wipe them out with just one swing of his iron whip. Cordelia knew that too, so she didn't take her time. She snapped her fingers as she cast her new spell. Corpse Explosion. An explosion of corpses. The monsters from hell that clung to Bandazel caused a chain of explosions. Dozens of monsters exploded in succession, and the explosive power was seriously tremendous. Boom, booms, boom. Bandazel's screams were heard in between the explosions. Then Cordelia looked back at Lena for the finishing blow. Lena. Lena responded to her call. She didn't just create a giant golem that couldn't properly fight so that Cordelia could excavate the monster corpses. Quilu. The golem stepped forward with a final roar. It moved its body just above Bandazel's head. Despite the numerous explosions, Bandazel saw it. He instantly realized what Jude and Cordelia had planned. So he couldn't help but shout, "Why, you demons?" The noise of the corpse explosions buried Bandazel's voice. Lena chanted the final spell. Cancel Create Golem. The golem dismantled. Numerous debris that were used to form the body of the almost 50-meter giant golem fell over Bandazel's head. Bangs, bangs, bang. Boom, booms, boom. The explosions continued and the rocks fell. Bandazel's miserable screams rang in between that. Bang! The huge rock that formed the golem's head made the last noise. Bandazel was buried under that small rocky mountain and could no longer be seen. Ha. Having cast that immense magic, Lena sat in place and tried to catch her breath. Despite the extreme cold, her whole body was wet as if she had been hit by rain. And Cordelia jumped from her spot. She joyfully shouted as the white ring appeared around her. We defeated him, Yahoo! She cheerfully shouted and hurried to the place where Lena sat down. We defeated him, Lena. She was refreshing, lively, and adorable. So Lena unconsciously smiled, and Cordelia embraced Lena. I love you, Lena is the best. Lena was a bit embarrassed at her very friendly attitude, but she soon hugged Cordelia back. She didn't know why this girl liked her so much, but thanks to her, they crossed the big hurdle. Cordelia. Jude. At Jude's call, Cordelia suddenly jumped again before she hugged him too. He thought that she was just giggling, but she abruptly gave a sharp sideways glance and said, "You're really bad, you're like a real demon, how could you be so evil?" "Do you like it then?" "Yes," Cordelia promptly replied and brightly smiled again. And as Lena watched the scene, she faintly smiled. It hadn't been that long since they met, but just looking at the lovely couple made her smile. Yes, everything went well. Not only did they close the Hell Gate, but they also wiped out 100 or so demons that had already crossed over. In addition, they defeated Bandaisel, a named demon. So it was finally over. It was enough. The two saved the world. No, it was something like that. Endymion was completely destroyed, and half of Raptor Canyon had collapsed, so Lena tried hard to look away from that and just watched Jude and Cordelia again. Lena smiled again as she gazed at the fantasy, no, the obviously crazy couple. And in the evening of that same day, at the outer part of the ruins that was formerly called Endymion, Lena's thoughts became like a prophecy. "Ah, so you were saying that the problem was solved?" "Yes, we solved the problem. Endymion is gone, so no more demons will appear on Endymion." In front of that bright and lovely smile, the Fairy Queen couldn't bear it any longer. With an elegant smile, she held the back of her neck and collapsed. Terms used in this chapter. Satan lost his job today. Korean meme about human acts that are so evil and vicious that it makes Satan lose his job. This meme has a lot of variations and is not limited to Satan lost his job today. The wild fairy queen Ionel raised her head. The beautiful light shone down from the colorful glass ceiling. The sunlight was scattered and diffused according to precise calculations, giving off a sense of fantasy and mystery to the viewer. "Wow!" A childlike voice came out of Ionel's mouth. Surprised by her voice, Ionel blinked and looked at herself, and she realized that her limbs were much shorter than usual. She wasn't a fairy queen. She was now her younger self before she became the queen. It was during the time when her mother was still alive. Ionel blinked her eyes and smiled. She thought like a fairy, not a queen. Whether she was in a dream or not now, she thought that she should enjoy this moment. How exciting! Instead of an elegant smile, Ionel had a cute and adorable smile before she looked around again. And she soon remembered where she was now. This was the greenhouse of the High Elves, located deep in Endymion. Besides magic, the High Elves of the Magic Kingdom Magellan also attained outstanding achievements in various fields of study. They created a much more beautiful garden in the underground than the one they had above the ground, and the fairies who were fond of pretty and lovely things would visit their gardens with the permission of the High Elves. Pretty! Flowers of numerous colors filled her sight. There were so many varieties that if it was a garden made by humans, it would have looked disordered because of the too many varieties, but this was the garden of the High Elves. Numerous flowers and trees were arranged together, but there was harmony in their arrangement. Far from looking disordered, the flowers and trees complemented each other, forming a very beautiful sight. It smells good. Ionel closed her eyes and enjoyed the garden's fragrance, and then came into her ears a voice that she had long missed. "Ionel! Mommy!" Ionel reflexively shouted as she jumped from her position and turned around. There stood her beautiful and caring mother, the previous fairy queen, with an elegant smile. "Mommy!" Ionel ran like a child and hugged her mother's waist. "You're still a child." "Yes, that's right, I'm a child, heh. How long had it been since she acted cutely like this? It had been a while since she spoke and acted like a normal fairy. The former fairy queen had a bit of a lonely smile when she looked at her daughter's face. Because in her eyes that could see beyond time and space, she saw the grown-up Ionel, her daughter who had become the fairy queen. The previous fairy queen caressed Ionel's cheek with emotions that could only be described as proud, regretful, and affectionate. "Ionel, do you like this place?" "Yes, I like it, it's very pretty." Yes, when Magellan's High Elves left Endymion, they especially asked us to take good care of it. The High Elves had already left Endymion when Ionel was born. However, the previous fairy queen remembered the time when the High Elves lived in Endymion. Mommy was a friend of the High Elves, right? Yes, I was. The High Elves were friends of us wild fairies. They let us use the hot springs and the garden to our heart's content. I like the hot springs too. You're truly my daughter. Hey, sir. The previous fairy queen stroked Ionel's head, and Ionel enjoyed her touch. This moment was just a dream, but as a fairy, she didn't care about distinguishing reality from the dream. Ionel? Yes, Mommy. This place take good care of Endymion. Someday on the day when the High Elves return, we can be proud. We can say that us fairies have never neglected our friendship with the High Elves. It was impossible to manage the entire Endymion. Even the High Elves had given up taking care of it. So just the places where the High Elves and fairies shared their friendship, which were the hot springs and gardens, were what they could preserve well. Yes, Mommy, I'll definitely do it. Phew, that's a good girl. I promise, definitely, pinky promise. All right, it's a pinky promise. Yes, Mommy. Ionel prettily smiled, and the previous fairy queen hugged her tightly. They shared each other's warmth under the sunlight shining down from the colored glass ceiling. Mommy. Ionel opened her eyes, and she realized that she was the fairy queen now. But for a moment, she was engrossed in her dream. Instead of facing reality, she chose to escape it for a while. Tick-tock, tick-tock. She suddenly stood up and left her room, with the hem of her dress trailing on the ground. She faced the sight in front of her. Didn't they say that laughter sometimes comes out when one faces a very absurd situation? The sight in front of her did not change. The scene in her dream only remained in her dreams now. It was completely ruined. The site where the great collapse took place could only be described as ruins. The fairy queen struggled to maintain her elegant smile. She soon felt faint again, but turned around and firmly stood, but she couldn't stop her weak voice from coming out of her mouth. It wasn't a dream. It would have been nice if it was a dream. If it was just a dream. If it was just a lie. Mommy, I'm sorry. Ionel couldn't keep her promise. I'm a bad child. I'm sorry. When tears streaked down the fairy queen's cheeks, there were some who were watching the scene secretly. Jude, what should we do? She's crying. Then should she not cry? Endymion was completely destroyed. When Jude spoke with narrowed eyes, Cordelia pouted her lips, timidly pushing her index fingers against each other. Jude sighed again when he saw her with that appearance, and then said, in addition to that, are you a real demon? How could you say that? What? Endymion is gone, so no more demons will appear on Endymion. Such words made Satan lose his job today. It was such a diabolical idea. No, apart from having such an idea, she put it out of her mouth and said it, and with such a lovely face and expression. Zoo! Jude's remarks made Cordelia shrink even further, but she had something to say in her defense. Why you taught me? What? I mean that when we broke the bridge. Cordelia was talking about the time when they broke the bridge to defeat Lacto. Jude was the one who originally said that statement, not Cordelia. However, Jude clicked his tongue at Cordelia's timid rebuttal and said with narrowed eyes, Is this the same as that, and isn't there something like a time and place? He was correct. Cordelia shrank even more, and Jude pulled the cheeks of such Cordelia with both of his hands. Yogu. Cordelia would normally be angry and resist it, but this time she didn't. She just accepted her punishment with a bleak face. But that did not last long. I know you're watching, come forward. At the Fairy Queen's call, Jude and Cordelia flinched at the same time before they cleared their throats and stepped forward. Jude, Cordelia. Your Majesty. Jude answered in a small voice, and Cordelia bowed her head after looking at the Fairy Queen's eyes. The Fairy Queen graciously smiled at their appearance. It's all right, you don't have to make such a dejected face. To defend Endymion, no. To save, no. It was for the world anyway. Though she was a bit unsettled in the middle, the Fairy Queen still kept her elegant smile until the end of her words. To close the Hell Gate, right? Yes, if the Hell Gate had just grown like that, there would have been a terrible tragedy. Cordelia's actions were rather excessive, but there was no other way back then. Because of Cordelia's decision on behalf of everyone, she was able to save my life too. If you punish her, let me receive it instead. When Jude didn't just stop defending her, and even went as far as to say that he would be willing to receive the punishment instead, Cordelia was startled and blinked, and the Fairy Queen shook her head. No, it's not fair to punish you. As you said, Cordelia saved everyone, and I think I'm at fault too for neglecting the management of other areas besides the original areas we maintained, because I didn't even know of the fact that the Hell Gate opened here. The Fairy Queen was also well aware of the Hell Gate's dangers. If the Hell Gate had grown just as Jude had said, the fairies would be the first to be at risk. So Cordelia, straighten your chest. Although Endymion is gone, isn't it clear that you saved the world and us fairies? Your Majesty. Cordelia was deeply moved and began to tear up. The Fairy Queen laughed a bit at Cordelia's response before she continued. I know of the name Lena, Holy Angel Lena, one of the 5 heroes who ended the tragedy of the Paragon Kingdom, but looking at her now, it seems she got the demon syndrome. Yes, that's right, we have to treat Lena. Cordelia quickly spoke without thinking, and the Fairy Queen also nodded her head. Yes, you are right, she is also our benefactor, so she deserves to be helped. Your Majesty. Cordelia's face was flushed with deep emotions again. Jude also expressed his admiration of her in his thoughts. She's a real queen. It was unbelievable that the benevolent woman in front of him was of the same race as the fairies he knew. In any case, the truly gracious Fairy Queen turned around and said, Demon syndrome is a disease caused by the accumulation of Hell's aura in the body, so if you wash away Hell's aura with holy aura, you'll be able to cure the demon syndrome. What she said was the truth. In fact, the quickest way to treat the demon syndrome in the game was to go a large temple, give as much donation money as possible, and listen to choirs hymns while bathing in holy water. There is a sacred place not far away. It's the place where the golden dragon, the king of the wild gods, interacted with Solari, the ancient sun god. Oh, Jude unknowingly expressed his surprise. Because according to the Fairy Queen's story, it was a land where 2 gods temporarily stayed together. It was literally a sacred place among the sacred places. I'll tell you the location, so take Lena there to cure the demon syndrome. Really? Yes, really. Wow, Her Majesty is the best, thank you very much. Cordelia was ready to embrace the Fairy Queen at that moment, but their absolute difference in heights prevented her from doing so. The Fairy Queen laughed a little at the appearance of Cordelia hesitating when she tried to hug her, and she soon looked back at Jude and said, Jude. Yes, Your Majesty. I'm saying this out of concern. The Fairy Queen's words trailed off at the end, before she suddenly cleared her throat and said while looking elsewhere. You can't destroy that place. The sacred place. Especially the sacred place. Of course, I'll try to prevent the worst situation from happening. Cordelia's face turned red at the moment Jude spoke, with a determined look, as if he was swearing an oath. After she struggled in that state, she spoke to the Fairy Queen in an urgent tone. I promise I'll just go quietly, really. Yes, I believe in you, truly, really, please, please. Her elegant smile remained the same, but at the end, there was some desperation in the Fairy Queen's words. It wasn't really just a sacred place. Because they had to protect that sacred place. Especially that sacred place. I promise, really. The dispirited Cordelia shrank her shoulders as she made a promise. Jude stepped forward again. Your Majesty, I will take responsibility and protect the sacred place from Cordelia. Yes, I believe in you. I'm not a demon. Cordelia timidly murmured shortly after the Fairy Queen's worried face and Jude's determined oath. The Fairy Queen turned to Cordelia again and spoke. I'm sorry, I've made you dispirited. As I said earlier, it's true that you saved us. You can be proud of that. you're a warrior who made a decision that couldn't be easily made. Sob, sob, your majesty. She, fairy queen, did a grievous harm to someone, and then pretended to help her, Cordelia. The fairy queen smiled a little mischievously at Cordelia, whose thoughts were clearly revealed in her face, and Jude also smiled. Ah, thank goodness, there's a way to cure Lena. You're right. The fairies' residence, which differed in time and space from ordinary places, wasn't a very good place to take a proper rest. For this reason, Lena and Kaplan were staying in a bathhouse in the outskirts of Endymion, which did not collapse. Yufufu, I'm excited, if we go to the sacred place. Lena will be cured from the demon syndrome, then Lena will regain the power of an angel, and will be able to obtain Lena's blood. Isn't that right? On the road to the bathhouse, Cordelia energetically walked and laughed, and she even began to sing. Lena's blood tilde do 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 tilde. Sacred place tilde do 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 tilde. Angel mode tilde do 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 tilde. Lena's blood tilde. Her singing and gestures were seriously cute and adorable, and Jude tried to distance himself from her, and Cordelia, having caught such Jude, glared at him. Why? No, are you asking because you don't know? Look at yourself. A beautiful girl was smiling brightly while singing about blood. Isn't it weird? HMPH, it's not strange though. However, she seemed to be embarrassed as her face turned red. Jude smiled and continued his words. Moving on, it's good. We saved Lena, and if we go on like this, we'll obtain the angel's blood. Yes, I'll be able to use ancestral regression, then it'll be possible to use this too. Cordelia spoke out loud as she took out the heavenly judgment, which she had worn on her back throughout their entire trip. It was one of the 100 swords that the Archangel Auriel himself forged, and a powerful magic item that could use Day of Judgment. It was currently sealed, so it was more of a club than a sword, but once she gained the power of an angel, she would be able to remove the seal. It's a happy event, a happy occasion. Yes, I especially like that we saved Lena. She had seen her die a lonely death with a painful expression in the cinematic movie, and that scene still remained in her eyes. But they had saved Lena. They saved the hero from Legend of Heroes, first episode, who should have died. It means a lot. Among the 5 main characters in the first episode of The Legend of Heroes, the Ghostblade Camel was the only one who was active after the second episode. So if that didn't happen, if all the 5 main characters survived and joined the fight to stop Armageddon, we have to make it happen. It wasn't just Lena. They somehow saved Iron Man Landius, even though the cause of his death was still unknown. The other 2 too. Necromancer Velkian and Druid Fran too. And furthermore, the heroes of The Legend of Heroes 2, too. What are you thinking about? A good idea. You're saying something strange again. Jude grinned at Cordelia's rebuke and returned the topic to the sacred place. Anyway, I hope that there's no dragon vein in the place we're going this time. What are you talking about? No, it's nothing. Jude shamelessly replied and pretended to be ignorant, while Cordelia pouted, but it was only for a moment. Let's hurry, I want to give Lena the good news. Okay. The 2 who were walking together began to speed up their pace. And under the feet of those 2, deep underground, the runaway of the dragon veins were continuously causing abnormalities. Lena, we're back, Lena. Cordelia entered the cave with a loud shout. It was the bathhouse where Jude and Cordelia met the wild fairies for the first time. Cordelia. Inside their temporary shelter, Lena had laid down a mat inside an empty bathtub and was modestly sitting on it. When she responded to Cordelia's call, Cordelia brightly smiled and ran to her. Lena, good news, we found a way to cure demon syndrome. Cordelia quickly clung to Lena's side and conveyed their conversation with the fairy queen. So we're thinking of going to the sacred place. Isn't that good news? It is, thank you very much for helping me in various ways. Aid your welcomes, heh. The happy Cordelia's cheeks blushed, and Lena unconsciously laughed. In fact, Lena was familiar with this kind of affection. because almost all those who knew of Lena's nickname, Holy Angel, were very friendly to her. But she felt that Cordelia was a little special. Not just because she liked Lena, but because she was concerned with Lena herself. Cordelia is so cute. Yes, I had her. When she kindly said that, Cordelia's face blushed even more as she let out a silly laugh. But Cordelia looked so cute that Lena laughed again. What a heartwarming sight, very nice. It was when the pleased Jude was watching that scene from the entrance. Jude, are we heading to the sacred place now? The dwarf Kaplan, whom the fairy queen recognized for his gentle and moist eyes, asked with sparkling eyes. The ruins of Solari and the sacred place of a wild god. For him, an archaeologist, it was like getting many valuable things in only one package. Yes, we will. Ooh. Though not as adorable as Cordelia's, Kaplan's ecstatic face and flushed cheeks was also enough to make him smile. Come to think of it, Kaplan had become strangely brighter than before, even after going through this incident. Perhaps he found some confidence. Jude and Cordelia had said to Kaplan many times that they were glad to be with him. But it wasn't just that. Kaplan's cheerfulness had another slightly different reason. I was nothing. Kaplan was called a god of disaster because an accident happened wherever he went. But in retrospect, it was merely accidents such as falling rocks, activating hidden traps, or encountering monsters. It's trivial in front of these two, it's trivial. It was trivial in front of these two who didn't stop at destroying a city, but even collapsed half of Raptor Canyon. Moreover, he found out that this wasn't the first time when he listened to their story. When they went to a mountain, they collapsed it. When they went to the fields, they burnt the fields. When they went to an underground city, they were truly destruction incarnate as they annihilated it. In front of these two, Kaplan himself was merely a drop in the ocean, so he felt that his worries so far were just something trivial. Of course, the biggest reason for him finding his confidence was because Jude and Cordelia repeatedly reassured him, but it couldn't be denied that he was also humbled by the great destruction caused by the two. Let's become stronger too. Just like Jude and Miss Cordelia. So that whatever difficulties that may come, he can break them down and move on. With a renewed determination, Kaplan gazed at Cordelia, who was warmly acting like a spoilt child in front of Lena, while Jude narrowed his eyes. It somehow feels different from what I intended. But that didn't matter. The important thing was that Kaplan found his confidence. Jude, when are we leaving? He heard Cordelia calling him just then, so Jude turned to her and answered. Well, there's no reason to drag it out. Miss Lena, if you don't mind, I'd like to start right away. Is that okay with you? Jude asked somewhat carefully. Because Lena's condition had worsened after the battle. Demon syndrome would worsen whenever mana was used, and Lena had already used a lot of mana before joining Jude and Cordelia's group. If she used a little more mana now, it would really lead to an irreversible situation. Cordelia had a worried look upon hearing Jude's question, but Lena held Cordelia's hand and said as if she was okay. I don't have a big problem in terms of physical strength. Let's start right away. Okay, then let's hurry. Lunchtime was already approaching, so even if they depart now, they had to hurry to get there before sunset. About an hour passed by. As they were heading northeast towards the sacred place, Cordelia quickly approached Jude, who was leading the group. Jude. Yes. He was glad to see the approaching Cordelia, who had been by Lena's side for the past hour, but Jude became curious why she came to him. He asked as he tilted his head, and Cordelia said while keeping her voice down. We are going to the sacred place now. And, according to the Queen, the sacred place is where the Golden Dragon, the king of the wild gods, and Solari, the sun god, interacted in the past, right? Yes, so it's a sacred place for both the wild gods and the Solari denomination. Yes, so there must be a dragon vein in the sacred place, right? Jude was about to nod his head immediately at Cordelia's words, but stopped. His eyes narrowed, and he then said in a low voice. What, is this a murder notice? No, is this a terror warning? What terms are you demanding? Hey, it's not like that. No, it is, and put your hand on your heart and ask your conscience. Think if your words were excessive or not. It's excessive, that's right, Jude said it was wrong. Cordelia put her hand on her chest and calmly said, as if she really heard the voice of her conscience. And at that sight, Jude unwittingly sighed. Your acting skills have improved. It's because of someone evil, and it wasn't acting just now, it really was the voice of my conscience. If you say so, anyway, why did you bring up the dragon vein? So. No, it's just in case. Just in case. Yes, just. Hey, I'm saying this just in case then, not the sacred place. Seriously, not the sacred place. The queen will weep bitterly, do you understand? She'll weep and cry. I know, I understand. I don't want to make the queen cry too, so don't worry. Cordelia said before going back to Lena while humming, and Jude had a somewhat ominous feeling as he continued to move forward. By late afternoon, the group was able to reach the sacred place. Located in the northeast of the Raptor Canyon, the sacred place was a basin similar to gentle snow breezes land, and it was a place that stood out from afar. Only that place has no snow. It was a green land in the middle of a pure white snowfield. Furthermore, it wasn't just without snow. As they approached the place, they could feel a warm wind blowing from inside the basin. It was as if only that place was spring. I can feel Solari's divine power. It was as Lena said. They could feel Solari's divine power all around them, just like when they entered Lysagang's sealing place. Inside the small basin that was about 100 meters in diameter. A place where it was spring despite being winter all around it. It's clearly Solari's ruins, the architectural style is old too. Kaplan said in an excited tone as he closely approached the pillars that served as gates at the entrance of the basin. But Jude and Cordelia focused more on another place. Tomb Guardians. Beyond the pillars sat 4 Tomb Guardians. They seemed to have no intention of doing anything that was particularly harmful, but their eyes that were looking at the group were those of a watcher. So instead of going in further, Jude stopped in his place and shouted loudly. We humbly ask Blue Whiskers, guardian of the sacred place, to allow us entry. The wild fairy queen sent us. At the same time, Cordelia raised the fairy's bonds that contained the earth protection. The fairy queen sent us. When Cordelia shouted and the fairy's bonds shined, the direction of the wind changed in an instant. The wind that blew from the inside stopped as a loud voice came. Blue Whiskers greets the visitors. A deep and loud voice was heard from the large temple located inside the basin, and the owner of the voice was soon revealed. As his name implied, it was a dragon with long blue whiskers. I am Blue Whiskers, guardian of the sacred place. State your names. It had blue scales and splendid deer antlers. Blue Whiskers looked more of an oriental dragon rather than a western dragon, and as it came forward with a dignified figure, Cordelia quickly bit her lips and held back her laughter. So cute. She couldn't help it. Blue Whiskers was huge and around 7 meters long, but because its shape was really like that of an oriental dragon, its limbs were too short and undersized when compared to its whole body. But as he stood on his small hind legs and toddled, Cordelia thought that the harmony between its dignified upper body and lower body was poor. Cordelia tried hard to hold back her laughter by biting her lips, and Jude stepped first like always and said, We are Jude Bayer and Cordelia Chase, who are under the protection of the Fairy Queen. I am Indiana Kaplan. I'm Lena Ainsberg. After Lena introduced herself, Blue Whiskers looked at them with narrowed eyes and then nodded. You're all good people, though the woman at the back has a strong demon's aura. Oh, did you come here to wash away that aura? Blue Whiskers wasn't a guardian of the sacred place for no reason. At his accurate analysis, Jude immediately nodded. Yes, you're right. The Fairy Queen informed us that she could wash away the demonic energy in the sacred place. Indeed. With his tiny hand, Blue Whiskers stroked his stomach instead of his chin, raised its head and said, Come in, those sent by the Fairy Queen don't have to go through the test. Blue Whiskers cried out loud and began to return to the temple, while Jude and Cordelia quickly turned around to Kaplan and Lena. Let's go. I'm glad that the conversation went well. Yeah. Although Lena looked somewhat puzzled as she was surprised by Blue Whisker's outspokenness, she soon smiled and stepped forward. And after a few minutes, having entered the temple, Jude and Cordelia let out oars of admiration. It really was a place where they interacted. Unlike the outside, which followed the typical style of the Solari temple, the inside followed the style of the wild gods. It was like a Western church on the outside, but was like a greenhouse on the inside. With the pillars and such everywhere, it was undoubtedly an artificial structure, but because it blended with the surroundings, it all felt natural. In particular, there was a pond about 10 meters in diameter at the center of the temple. The pond was surrounded by stone pillars and had a faint yet beautiful light rising from it, giving the pond a mysterious feeling. It's a sacred pond. It's a place where you can wash off anything. Blue Whiskers spoke in a proud tone and continued to look at Lena. I can tell from your eyes, though you have been stained by the demon's power, you are a truly good person. You are allowed to enter the pond, so wash away the darkness and regain the light. The voice of Blue Whiskers echoed loudly in the temple, as if it was a voice from heaven. After Lena bowed to Blue Whiskers, who was stroking its belly while still looking holy, she glanced at Jude and Cordelia before approaching the pond, and the two then stared at Lena's back. Hey, Blue Whiskers. Say it. How long will it take Lena to wash away the demon's aura? I don't know exactly how long, but it will take some time if she was tainted by the demonic aura for a long time. Satisfied by the sincere but a little vague answer, Cordelia looked at Lena again. As Lena entered the pond with her clothes still on, the surrounding stone pillars glowed green. It's the light of purification. Don't be afraid and move on to the center of the pond. Lena did not doubt Blue Whisker's words. She moved further and reached the center of the pond, and a green light covered her and the whole pond. Is this okay? Worried about Lena, who was no longer visible due to the light, Cordelia asked, and Blue Whiskers nodded. It's all right, all you have to do is wait. Thanks for everything. I am the guardian of the sacred place, so it is natural to help those in need. Blue Whiskers replied with a smile and later walked to a corner of the temple, which seemed to be its dwelling place, and Cordelia tried hard to only see Blue Whiskers' upper body. Several seconds passed. Cordelia. Yes. She turned around at his call, and Jude pointed outside the temple with his chin. I'll go out for a while and look around. There was nothing to do here except to rest and wait anyway. So it was better for him to monitor the surrounding terrain like what he usually did. Then I'll go with you. Okay, if you say so. It's fine if we leave Kaplan alone, right? Yes, he doesn't look bored. Let's call him at dinner time when we get back. Because Kaplan's focus was on the walls as he eagerly observed this and that. Mr. Blue Whiskers, we'll go out for a while and get some fresh air. Don't go too far, my protection cannot reach beyond the sacred place. Blue Whiskers replied to Cordelia's shout, and Jude unconsciously had a bitter smile. What is it? No, I just thought that you quickly became close. Because he's like a kind uncle. Cordelia replied with a smile, and the two left the temple and went up the basin, because they wanted to climb to a high place and survey the surrounding area. And a few minutes later, having arrived at the highest place, Jude and Cordelia both frowned. Devil's Eye. There were people coming from far away and heading towards the sacred place. Even if their numbers were small, it was around 50 or so. There were many knights who wore heavy armor, and they looked like they came from the Argon Empire and not the Wild Lands. The one in the lead is Bilvine, right? I think you're right. He was a huge man whose whole body was covered in a black armor. Among the mid-ranking demonic humans of the Devil's Eye, he was someone who belonged to the particularly strong group. Unbeknownst to Jude and Cordelia, the Devil's Eye had actually felt a great sense of crisis when they lost two mid-ranking demonic humans due to the actions of the two. At this rate, their plan to swallow up the Wild Lands would be disrupted. So in order to contaminate the Eastern Dragon veins, a stronger group was needed. Thus, they decided to deploy Black Knight Bilvine and his men, elites of their group in the Argon Empire, which was the home of the Devil's Eyes. It's not a simple formation, there's some monsters mixed in their group. In terms of number alone, they were less than in the previous fights, but the quality of each one of them was different. Just 50 of them would be able to fight against 500 royal soldiers of the Len kingdom. In addition, they also had prepared a method to deal with the wild god. What should we do then? He though on how they would be able to protect the purity of the sacred place from those who were trying to contaminate the dragon vein. If I consider on a simple way to defeat them, they could bait the enemies towards the middle of the basin and blow up the dragon vein to annihilate them. After he thought about it, Jude looked up in surprise and said to Cordelia, who looked quite distressed, "No, this demon, anything but that." What are you talking about? No, you can't. What exactly are you talking about? That's that method. Having no idea what he was talking about, Cordelia somehow felt it unfair and frowned, and Jude turned to Bilvain and his men. He counted the remaining time until they reached the sacred place. At the same time, he thought about Lena and the sacred place's situation. And a few seconds later, something came into Jude's mind.